Welcome to this Whole Life Action Hour. I'm Ocean Robbins, your host, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. We're going to be looking at how you can build love, community, and connection with food. Throughout history, breaking bread, sharing food has been a source of connection between people. But in the modern world, with so many different dietary patterns and beliefs, it can also become a source of division. A lot of family gatherings are beset by conflict. And many people find themselves compromising on their food values for fear of rocking the boat or offending loved ones. So how do you navigate dietary differences and keep people connected? And how can you use the sharing of food as a source of love and bonding? Well, we are here today with the perfect person to be having that conversation with, Dreena Burton. So a little bit about Dreena here. She could be the most prominent vegan cookbook author of our times. She's the author of 6 best-selling plant-based cookbooks. She's also collaborated with Food Revolution Summit speaker and renowned plant-based physician, Dr. Neil Barnard, on the cheese trap, and she co-authored his most recent cookbook for reversing diabetes. Dreena's recipes have been featured by Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, Forks Over Knives, Blue Zones, the Food Network, and she also previously worked as culinary coordinator for Food Revolution Network's Whole Life Club, of which this event today is a project. In addition to being a wildly popular recipe developer, she's also a mother of 3, and she is passionate about bringing the family together to nurture health and wellness for all generations to come. Welcome, Dreena.
Thank you, Ocean. It's wonderful to be back with the community.
Well, it's so good to have you back with us. Now, I want to be clear here about one thing I should have said right at the beginning, that nothing that you hear today is medical advice. This is coaching. We're sharing our best insights. But of course, as in all things, you should always consult with a qualified healthcare professional regarding your specific medical issues and needs. That said, you are going to learn a lot today. And this is a project of Whole Life Club, Food Revolution Network's ongoing membership community. Some of the questions that I'll be bringing to this interview come from our Whole Life Club members. Okay, so Dreena, let's jump right in here to talk a little bit about family dynamics and food. If you're somebody who wants to eat healthy and not everybody around you that you love is doing the same thing, what are some tips for navigating those dynamics in a way that stay true to your values, which include love and connection with the people you care about?
I think it's paramount to remember when we are having these moments with our family, meals, get together, that we are there for that connection, right? We center on the food so much, but really the food is important because it has been part of the tradition for so long, right? And the tradition really is to get together, connect, talk, have laughs, create new memories. And so if we can shift our perspective away from it being about the food, which I think we can be very sensitive about because we care about our food so much, and remembering that not everyone does.
Yes.
Right. And what our level of interest is not theirs, sort of respecting that, stepping back from it and coming back to why we are there and navigating the diet in advance, when we have special dinners, navigating it in advance with the host, or if you're hosting, so that things can run smoothly once you're there.
What about people who like their spouse? I mean, day to day, not just for an occasional gathering, but like day to day, maybe someone's husband or wife doesn't eat so healthfully or doesn't eat the same way they do. Let's suppose you want to be whole foods plant-based and you're actually cohabiting, sharing a kitchen with a housemate or a loved one who eats very differently. How do you navigate that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that people who are in that situation are incredibly strong, first of all, right? Because they're really holding true to their own values. And so credit to you for doing so. And I think it's also that time when we remember where we were at once, right? Reflect back. We weren't always in this place. There was a time when we really believed we needed meat, we needed dairy. We were very connected to perhaps junk food patterns of eating, and knowing that this change is not something you can force or push on someone. We all know that, right?
Yeah.
And rather to keep being that light, in the sense that I come back to a quote that a friend said to me once about work. Is it tiring or inspiring? And so are we inspiring or tiring people? If we're inspiring, then we're using the energy that we have around our food, the passion that we have about it, and being an example rather than lecturing, right?
Yeah.
That's a big difference.
Absolutely. So true. And, I also know, practically speaking, some people will do things like look at, let's suppose they're wanting to make burritos. And they'll put out a bunch of fixings, and not everyone will use all of them. So, somebody who's gluten-free is going to use corn tortillas, and someone who's not might use a whole wheat flour wrap. And, but you put out different ingredients, and everyone's going to eat the guacamole, probably.
Of course.
Right.
Yes.
And, maybe the beans and the rice, which can be cooked not in chicken stock. And then, and then you get to, like, if somebody has their ground whatever on the side, then or their cheese or whatever, they can do that. And then there's the vegan cheese over here. So sometimes families kind of coexist in ways that can work. And then, of course, the other piece is that sometimes people will introduce, some of the meat analogs or the non-dairy cheeses that are out now. And people who are really into their meat and cheese will taste that and they'll be like, oh, that's good enough for me. Like, in fact, they can't even tell the difference in some cases, right?
Absolutely. And sometimes that resistance from family members comes from a place, well, one where they're feeling a little threatened themselves, right? Yeah. We know that they feel that you're moving ahead and they're not there with you. But also, if they're just happy with the food, I always say, if they're not noticing what's not there, right? They're not noticing that there's nothing that they're missing and they're just finding it delicious and satisfying, then they're along for the ride for the meal, right? One meal at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that in my experience, a lot of people change their attitudes when they taste new things and they realize this is actually good,
Yes.
And it's that's why you, I think, are doing such revolutionary work, because you're showing people that eating really healthy food that tastes really good doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg, doesn't have to take all day. And when you realize all that, you're like, well, what's not to like here? If it's delicious and it's fun to make and it's also good for you, bonus, you'll live longer and healthier. It's very seductive ultimately. And that's what we need to do. We have to actually make healthy eating, more enticing than the standard American diet, if we're going to gain traction and change culture, right? And so thank you for your part in that. A lot of people struggle, though, with stress. Partly it's the stress of learning new habits, and partly it's the stress of, anytime you're hosting people, you're cooking more food, you've got more concerns, more stresses around what people will or won't like, and you've also got more time and energy involved in what it takes to do all that. And holidays, as an example, are a time when we want to be celebrating and hopefully replenishing from the stresses of life. Yeah. But a lot of times they just become the next stress, the next overwhelm. It's like, oh my God, we've got to do all this and feed all these people, and what will they think? And, and these two aren't even on speaking terms. And, like, we have all these stresses. So the last thing people want is to have healthy food be even another layer of stress at a time when they're already overwhelmed. So then they often fall to old patterns of doing what's super familiar, even if it's not really how they want to be living. Any thoughts on how to dial down the stress and dial up the healthfulness at times like that?
Definitely, because the holidays can be very depleting, right? We look forward to them and there's already a lot of anticipation and our adrenaline is pumping and so much going on, but then they can be very depleting. And I say to my readers sometimes when I go on YouTube and do videos, just remind yourself, Martha's not coming, right?
Yeah.
Martha Stewart's not going to be at the table. No one's judging how perfect the place settings are. Usually you're having a small get together, maybe extended family, and really remind yourself that this doesn't have to be the be all and end all of all meals, right? And you can do maybe a theme dinner, like you talked about the burritos. I've had a number of people in one of my Facebook groups saying that for the holidays, they're doing theme dinners, like they're doing a Mexican night or doing like Mediterranean flair of meals. So you can take a different angle on the tradition of food, and also allow yourself some shortcuts, right? So I used to be that person that wanted to make everything from scratch for the holidays. And I know a lot of people feel that way, but really you can, one thing is you can do some things in advance, right? There are parts of your meal that can definitely be prepared in advance, even like a week or more in advance, to take some of that last minute stress away. But also be willing to maybe pick up an organic cranberry sauce for yourself, or maybe pick up a vegan gravy mix so that you're not making that from scratch, and know that it's okay to have a few shortcuts. Maybe you want to pick up a holiday roast rather than make your own main this year, and just dial back that pressure on yourself to have everything be picture perfect.
Yeah. When you said some things can be done up to a week in advance, what kinds of things are you talking about?
Yeah. So this has been my survival tip for making, holiday dinners, is to look at what your menu is and then start to see where you can prepare things in advance. So for instance, a vegan gravy can be made days in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Many recipes you can freeze and then reheat and just whisk them back into the proper texture and beautiful recipe that they were to begin with. Cranberry sauce can be made a couple of weeks in advance, and perhaps even longer. Mm-hmm. You could freeze it. Things like if you're doing a lot of purees, I love to do roasted squash and roasted sweet potato purees. So you could bake those vegetables a few days in advance, then puree them a day or two in advance, have it ready in the fridge, and then it can be reheated. Your main, if it's like a nut loaf or a lentil loaf or some other kind of main, usually you can prepare that a day or two in advance. And then just thinking as well as the veggies and items that you need to even wash ahead of time, like washing kale or green beans or Brussels sprouts. Do those a day or two in advance. And then it's just about the chopping, or you can chop in advance. So there's all these things that can be done in sequence, so that the day of, it's more about reheating rather than cooking everything. And desserts, of course, cookies, pies and things. Some cookies can be made in advance and refrigerated for a week, a pie for several days. So you've got lots of options to streamline that process and not feel like it's all about one day of mad food prep.
You mentioned freezing with a couple of things, and that got me curious. Some things freeze well, sometimes, occasionally, they're even better after they've been frozen.
Yes.
Other things are disasters when you freeze them. Is there any kind of rule of thumb for how to know what things won't freeze well? Is there something they have in common, some way that their cells burst that you could identify or something?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have found that mushrooms don't freeze too well. They become watery after you thaw them. So if you're doing a gravy, maybe opt for a gravy that isn't a mushroom-based gravy. There's lots of recipes. I have one on my site. It's really easy to make. It's a golden gravy. And that type of gravy can be frozen because it doesn't have those mushrooms or other vegetables in there. And I find that too, grains don't freeze very well. Beans freeze well. Winter squashes and pureed soups, things like that freeze well. But grains get watery after they thaw, kind of like mushrooms. And so if you're doing a casserole and it has, say, brown rice in it or quinoa, it's not the greatest thing to freeze and then thaw.
I'm thinking about tofu is a good example of the principle that happens with grains, because when you freeze tofu, it actually releases its water, it separates. So what was a kind of consistent, very moist item becomes more like a sponge. It's like dry. Suddenly you can wring out the sponge, and instead of being soft, it's like the texture gets a lot more
porous.
Coarse is the word that's coming to mind. And it's and then there's holes where the water was.
Yes.
You literally squeeze it after you've frozen tofu and thawed it, and water will just pour out of it.
Yes.
And which is actually cool. You can do some really interesting culinary things with frozen and thawed tofu if you get the water out of it. It's a more meaty kind of texture in a sense. And it can also absorb flavors at that point, interestingly, as well. But if you're looking for something soft on the tongue, freezing, it's a terrible idea. And it strikes me that I've seen this with millet before, that it does kind of release some of the moisture, and you wind up with something that's kind of dry and more like that tofu texture in a way.
Yes,
so that's
millet.
Interesting. Not sure why that is exactly chemically, but we see that with grains, don't we?
Yes, grains and millet is almost not very palatable at all, actually, after it's been thawed. It becomes a different component altogether. But yes, in tofu, like you said, it can be a wonderful culinary application to use it that way. But if you've made, say, a tofu roast or a tofu burger and then freeze it when you thought, you're going to have that reaction where it releases water and it's not the same.
Yeah. If I had to have one thing that I was going to say, I love to have in the freezer, it's bananas. And reason being, bananas, they ripen over time, and they're not always at the peak of ripeness at the right moment, but you can freeze them at the perfect moment, Yeah. And then they're so interesting for smoothies. And actually we use them also for frozen desserts. We make our own homemade sorbets. It's like a favorite dessert around our house. And we'll use the Vitamix, and we'll blend them up with a little soy milk, unsweetened soy milk, and maybe some vanilla extract and some cherries, or to make kind of a cherry vanilla flavor sorbet, or add in some peaches and strawberries, and it gets it all frozen. And you blend it up with just a little bit of soy milk for thickener, maybe a little nutmeg if you want to get a slightly more savory element, and then put them in cones. And everybody just chows down. It's kind of a soft serve ice cream type of thing. And it's really good.
Delicious. And you mentioned nutmeg. That's really the secret to eggnog, by the way. When people want to make their own nog at home and they have a particular plant-based milk that they love, that's really what's in those commercial nog products. And you can make them at home with less sweetener, because some of those are very, very sweet. I just thought I'd mention that because nutmeg popped out to me.
Awesome. Yeah, so cool. Yeah, and we're seeing some interesting culinary breakthroughs lately with use of like chili and even cayenne in more sweet kinds of dishes too, aren't we? Mixing them with chocolate, and it's fun to see that, isn't it?
Yeah, and very seasonal, because those warming spices are really, our bodies are really enjoying those when the temperatures drop, right? I still am someone who loves a green smoothie in the morning, but I put ginger in it now at this time of year to warm it up.
Nice. We've got some questions from some of our Whole Life Club members, so let's jump into a few of those. Nancy said, navigating my grandchildren to healthier eating always seems to be a challenge. I've tried to make simple smoothies with them, adding maybe a few spinach leaves into the mix, but their first reactions are always more or less uck. How can you be transparent in showing what goes into a smoothie, but somehow navigating their somewhat negative reactions?
I really would find a way to make it playful, depending on the age. Make it really playful for them. So when kids are young, they really kind of grasp onto something that becomes a bit of a game. And I used to say silly things with my girls when they were younger, like quinoa, good for your beanoa, like meaning your brain, and things like that, just little rhymes. And if they're feeling a bit invested, then they will more likely want to try it. So maybe ask them what ingredient what's their favorite fruit to put in a smoothie, like, or what would be totally crazy to put in a smoothie. And they might say something like kiwi or whatever, and have them build that idea. And if you obviously, if you change the color too, then they may not notice those greens are in there. But if you want to be transparent and have them involved, say, hey, let's find a way to make this taste good. What do you think will really make it taste good? And make it a bit of an interesting challenge for them that they can work with you. Pineapple works really well in smoothies, really masks the green flavor. And just having them find that edge of play with it so that they're the ones in the driver's seat with it, right? A little bit of control.
Yeah. With smoothies too, there's a whole spectrum, if you will, from like green smoothies that are super healthy and taste not exactly amazing. It's an acquired taste, let's put it that way. Maybe use ginger and lemon to get some nice notes in there. But the bottom line is blended kale does not taste great, in my personal opinion. But then on the other hand, you've got smoothies that are pure fruit, or even commercial ones that have flavorings and additives and sugar in them, right? Which maybe taste good, but at a cost, right? So we kind of have this spectrum here. And my personal experience with our kids is that they learned the difference real early between their dad's smoothies and like Jamba Juice. And they were like, let's go for Jamba Juice. But at home, they were like, no, we're not having any smoothies. So for us, like, smoothies actually aren't the most playful, best way to get greens into the diet. because they're not a finger food. And quite frankly, a lot of kids like to eat with their fingers.
That's true.
And if it doesn't taste sweet enough, so you can go, if you go with fruit, that's great. And, you know, we need fruit in our diet. So there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to get greens in, smoothies may or may not be the best option for a child. So in my experience, things they can pick up with their hands and munch on, whether it's something they dip in hummus or just eat straight away. We make a homemade, we do dip salads. So make a bunch of lettuce and we do whole leaves. And then we get out maybe some sliced pepper, slices of tomato, cucumber, maybe even avocado slivers, put all that out in the middle. And then everyone has a little bowl of dressing and they grab things and they use the lettuce kind of like a wrap, and they put the other things inside of it. And then they dip in the dressing and eat that.
Beautiful.
And
like a spring roll almost.
Yeah. Our kids have been doing that since they were little, and we go through more lettuce than I know anybody who eats. I mean, like we'll eat a couple heads as a family every night, just about, you know, and as long as the dressing is reasonably healthy, you know, it's a good way for us. We get a good balance of omega-3 and omega-6 fats. They're about equal. Get some olive oil in there, lots of lemon juice, nutritional yeast, you know, raw onion, raw garlic. It's good stuff, you know, lots of flax oil. And at the end of the day, they're having this really tangible experience of interacting with vegetables in a healthy way that they enjoy. And so, you know, that dressing we go through by the gallon, you know, our homemade dressing. You can find one your family likes, but I think that's a good tip as well. Totally. Basically, finger foods are popular with kids. The same thing, even like Brussels sprouts. Like I'm not personally the biggest Brussels sprout fan, I'll admit, but our kids love roasted Brussels sprouts. They just pick them up and eat them when they got the right seasoning mix on them. Yes.
It's kind of like a lot of kids love veggie sushi. And that's a good way to get different vegetables into them as well. And I love that idea of the dippers. I have found that with kids, they will integrate eating more greens when there is a really good dressing involved, like you said. And for my kids, they've always loved a Caesar that's low on garlic. If it's not too garlicky, they'll really enjoy it. And one other item, when you mentioned the finger foods, it just popped that idea to me about smoothies. If you make a smoothie and freeze it into little popsicles, they may enjoy it that way too.
Cool. Yeah. Fascinating. That's great. You can also, there's also like kale chips, right? That's an interesting approach for seasoning, because sometimes people like combining finger food with crunch, you know, is often a winning combination as well, right?
Yes, kale chips has helped my husband transition from tortilla chips to eating kale chips. He always said at lunch he liked to crunch with a sandwich or whatever, and he would eat all these tortilla chips. And I'm like, honey, it's a lot of tortilla chips. So now he's moved into kale chips. And sometimes it's just that, like you say, it's a textural thing that some people want to have a chew or a crunch rather than to have a smoothie or some other, you know, way of eating the greens.
Yeah, absolutely. Lori asked, could Dreena have a section of her talk to discuss batch cooking and putting portion size servings into the freezer for those times when we don't want to or don't have time to cook anything but a microwave nutritious but inexpensive homemade meal? Perhaps she has recipes that fit this profile well. Also, once frozen, how does she keep abreast of what's in her freezer?
Excellent question about batch cooking, because I find, and especially as our kids have gotten older, it has been essential for me to keep food in rotation and that they can grab food and quickly make healthy meals for themselves and snacks. So pretty much weekly, I do big batches of roasted chickpeas, and there's lots of different recipes out there for roasted chickpeas. But one of the easiest things I do with chickpeas is simply a little bit of balsamic vinegar, some tamari, a tiny amount of maple syrup, roast it up with that seasoning. And usually I'll do 3 or 4 cans, and then they're in the fridge so that the kids can take them out to snack or work them into wraps or bowls. All kinds of, you know, things with, you know, lots of options there. Grains. So grains that batch cook very well. My favorites are different varieties of rice.
Mhm.
So, and try some new varieties. I've found some black rice recently that I'm really loving. And another grain that I've kind of turned on to more recently is farro. And that one batch cooks nicely too, and quinoa. And so if you have those batch, you cook a larger, always cook more than you need for a given meal, say enough for 3 meals. And grains will keep in the fridge up to about 5-6 days. It depends on how often you open the container, because you're letting in more oxygen and it can spoil it over time. But if you're not opening the container, then they'll stay usually about 6 days or so.
Mhm.
And then if you're cooking beans, lentils, they freeze well. Beans freeze well, unlike grains. And this time of year, I do a lot of batch cooking of sweet potatoes, winter squash. One of my favorite squash is those big kabocha or red curry squash. And they look really intimidating, right? Because they've got very coarse rinds.
Yes.
And people don't know what to do with them. So we tend to kind of shy away, like, oh, it's a beast. I don't know what to do. And if you're prepping those from raw, it's very hard to cut them. So I recommend roasting the entire thing in your oven, put it on a tray with parchment paper, bake it at about 425. Depending on the size, it'll take about 45 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, until it's just pierced fork tender with a skewer or a fork. And then open it up, take out the seeds, remove the rind, and then you have it in the fridge. And you can use it in salad bowls. You can use it in a pasta sauce. You can use it in casseroles or in soups, of course.
Yeah.
I use that a lot. And it's a very, those squash are very dense and they're very nourishing, but they're very dense and hearty, not watery. So I really love those. And whenever you're baking sweet potatoes or potatoes, bake a lot of those. They'll stay in the fridge for 5-6 days as well. Another thing I try to batch is salad dressings, hummus, dips, things like that. Make a little extra. You can freeze. Hummus freeze really well. People always are surprised that you can freeze hummus, but especially homemade hummus, it freezes really, really well. So those are kind of my top ones that I move through every week. I also prep tofu, and I'll do 2 or 3 packages at a time and season those really easily. Again, it could be like some lemon juice, a little bit of tamari. It can be some barbecue sauce, just whatever you like. Bake it up with that seasoning, and then it can be in the fridge for up to, again, 6-7 days.
It's fantastic, really. In our house, we soak legumes for a couple of days before we cook them. And we pretty much always have something on tap, if you will. So every 2 or 3 days, we're cooking another batch of legumes and another batch of one of the grains, usually quinoa. And we soak that too overnight before we cook it and then rinse it off. And actually with quinoa particularly, it tastes a bit sweeter when it's been rinsed or soaked beforehand. And it's a little bit more bioavailable because it's starting to sprout a little bit, when you soak it. So we like to cook our grains and our legumes. And then we have big glass containers in the fridge that are loaded up with these, and then we can scoop them out and make different kinds of things. One day's burrito can be the next day's casserole, can be the next day's salad topping, right? And so we just kind of use it in all kinds of different things. But having those on hand, we also cook big quantities of kale, especially from the garden. When it's going off in the garden, we'll like cook a big chunk, and we'll have big containers full of kale in the fridge as well. And again, that can be mixed and matched in interesting ways. Obviously you can add it to pasta. You can have it as a side. You could have it for breakfast. I might sound weird, but I actually have been known to eat kale for breakfast. And you know what? It's awfully good for you. It's a great way to start the day. So
whatever you like, right?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And my parents almost named me Kale, by the way. So I'm really partial to it. Yeah. So anyways, I think that batch cooking is awesome. And it really is a way to get a major head start. I mean, when you're going to go make dinner, you don't have time to cook beans usually, right? You got to plan ahead on that kind of thing. But if you've already got them ready to go, then it takes dinner and you could have something on the table in 15 minutes, just with a good, especially if there's a good sauce already on hand, you're just warming and mixing.
Yeah. And a lot of meals are about a good sauce too. And I encourage people to kind of put a little bit of a twist on how they define a meal. I mean, we're used to, as eating plant-based, seeing our plate a little bit differently, right? But also see recipes a little differently. This is something I did a lot in the new book, talking about repurposing a recipe. So for instance, if you make a pureed squash soup, that may be your dinner one night. But then if there's leftovers, maybe not enough for a soup that night, it can become a pasta sauce.
Yes.
So it doesn't have to be a red pasta sauce. It doesn't have to be a marinara, right? That then becomes a pasta sauce, or you can use it as a sauce inside of a burrito, or to drizzle over top of potatoes. Like, just kind of think outside of the box of how you're using leftovers, because sometimes we maybe have only a cup or two of a leftover soup, and what do you do with it? You can repurpose it in a different way. And when you have that sort of different perspective, it really allows your meals to be a lot easier to put together.
Yeah, very cool. Lori also asked, once frozen, how do you keep abreast of what's in your freezer?
Definitely you need to do some labeling on your containers. I am not the best at that. I love to like get things quickly put away, and then a little later I look at it and say, what is that? But you can usually identify, it's just other people in the house can't identify it. But definitely labeling your containers, and perhaps putting a date on it, right? When you packed it, so you know if it's starting to perhaps go stale. It may be in there for 6 months, and things tend to just take on that freezer aroma after that time.
So one labeling tip is you can actually get labels that are dissolvable. So when they go in the dishwasher or even in the sink, they just melt. And the nice thing about that is you don't have to spend time scraping off labels and trying to get the glue off. And that's, who wants to do that, right? And that's one of the reasons I don't like to label, is because when it comes out, I'm gonna have to deal with that. But with these labels, it's really easy. It's like it's a non-issue anymore, and that makes it a lot more convenient. So you can get those, at office supply stores or Amazon or what have you. Yeah,
that's brilliant. Didn't know that.
Yeah. Another tip with freezing is really just to go through the freezer every so often and sort of figure out if there's things that need to be excavated and used. Kind of keep tabs of what's in there, and then put in, if you have a certain types of freezer, you need to put things in the front that you want to use sooner, and kind of organize it a little bit. And that's helpful as well, because things don't last forever in there. We kind of think of it like they're preserved forever, but of course they're not. Though some things will last a very long time, but not everything.
No, and they tend to take on a stale flavor, even if they do last a while. And I think most of us fall into that trap of having one of those deep freezes where you lose everything down there because you just keep putting things on top of it, right? So yes, you do need to kind of stay on top of it and have a little bit of, I know some people have a bit of a running inventory, like they have a notepad somewhere where they have listed things that they're putting in their deep freeze so that they know, oh, I do have that in there.
Yeah, cool. Tracy said, my siblings and I really love to cook from scratch. We love farm fresh, flavorful, and herbaceous whole foods plant-based food. It would be easy for us to create a delicious whole foods plant-based meal together. However, our family elders are very conventional, have limited and sensitive palates. Rosemary is considered exotic. Sensitive stomachs that match those palates, and inflexible ideas of what exactly should be served for holiday meals, right down to canned peas, corn, and cranberry sauce from the 1950s. It might as well be a TV dinner. Our styles of eating are so far apart that compromise feels very out of reach and makes the holidays feel very frustrating. It's become a point of contention over the years, and now we all dread those holiday meals together. Any words of wisdom would be appreciated.
Yeah, it's one of those moments of you're not changing them, right? And can we find a place to get together and enjoy a meal? Is there a way that you can introduce a new dish, allow them to have their meal, what they're enjoying, and you bring what you enjoy? I mean, it sounds simple. It may involve a little bit of coordination, but perhaps, they're enjoying their food. You bring yours and offer that, hey, this is something new. I'd love you to try. Keeping in mind that they may be resistant, but that's not why you're there, right? And perhaps you and these family members that really love whole foods, plant-based cooking can get together and do another meal that's not as sensitive around the holidays, but you can just do another meal another time that's really celebrating the food that you love, right? And take it away from the holiday scene, which just becomes so charged. And you just don't want to get into those emotional charged situations.
Yeah. Yeah, I come back to like kind of a live and let live orientation. It's like, you know what I really need, my bottom line is I want to be respected for who I am. And quite frankly, I want to respect other people for who they are and where they are on their journey. So, the notion that Martin Luther King said, you have no moral authority with those who can feel your underlying contempt. When we judge people or pathologize them for not being who we think they should be, we lose moral standing in the relationship. And so, of course, you may have all the opinions and you may be totally right about why somebody's dietary pattern is not only limiting their pleasure in life, but also shortening their life, and even worried about how that's going to impact you as a possible future caregiver. But at the same time, we also have to honor that everybody has their own path and gets to be the author of their life. And you don't know what somebody's purpose is in this life, or what experiences they need to have. Like, no one can rob anybody of the right to experience the consequences of the choices they make. And so you don't know what that's going to lead to. And sometimes pain pushes and sometimes vision pulls. And, it was my grandpa's serious diabetes and heart disease that led him to change his diet and become a fan of his son's work, after founding Baskin Robbins. But he needed to get to that place where he was on death's door before he made those changes. And he might not have gotten there if he'd actually listened to my dad sooner. But at the same time, life works in mysterious ways. So honoring people and loving them, I think, is part of my recipe for happiness. And that includes respecting them and loving them no matter what they eat. And at the same time, I want the same from them, which means that I want them to respect my choices. And if they're going to make a gravy and they can leave out the chicken stock so that I can partake, that's lovely. If they can cook the rice in water or vegetable broth, that's lovely. And then we can coexist together and create a family meal where everybody gets to eat, right? And not everybody has to eat the same thing. But we're saying that love in this family is more important than ideology, right? With all of the politics and all of the divisions and all of the ways that we get fractured in our world right now, I think that's one of the gifts of family, is it can be a place where we say, you know what, with all the things that are broken and dysfunctional and all the miscommunications, we still love each other, and we still show up together. And there can be something beautiful about that.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. So beautifully said. And on that point of someone making a dish for you, if someone does make a dish for you, really acknowledge it. Maybe even afterwards, send them a note, a little card of thanks, a little bit of gratitude for making that step for you too. Maybe they made you cookies, or maybe they, like you said, made the rice for you without butter in it or something. Take that little step after to acknowledge and thank them. I think that would be very special to do. And also, I think in these times, as you know, Ocean, we can be very, pure about our diets in our own lives. But in these circumstances where we're with family, if someone is making a dish for you and maybe they used vegan margarine in it and you don't normally eat it, but relax the standards for that day, right? Just allow yourself to be in the moment, enjoy a little bit of it, and not feel too pure about your own choices, because you can always return to your own diet the next day. And I'm not saying relax the standards of not eating animals. Of course, we have our own standards that we want to respect, but just relaxing the boundaries of those, right? So that we can be part of that communion with family.
Sure. I mean, if you're an ethical vegan or vegetarian, then you want to be true to your own core ethics. For some people, it's a sense of basic sensibility, almost faith, right? I mean, you're not going to ask somebody to commit blasphemy because they're trying to fit in. But at the same time, for other people, it's a different equation. People are plant-based for a lot of different reasons. And so bottom line is, listen to your own core values and be true to those. But also remember, one of those core values probably is love and connection. That's why you're getting together with people in the first place, hopefully, right?
Yes. Yes.
So trying to return to that. Dreena, if people want to cultivate loving connection with family members, what are some ways to do that aside from food?
Yeah, I think it'd be really wonderful for people to think outside of that food box, right? Because holidays seems to be so focused on food, but maybe you can create some traditions that are not food based at all. Maybe you get together for a nice family walk in the morning and go explore a new park and go for a walk on a crisp but nice morning during the holidays. Or maybe you get together and make an ornament together, create some kind of tradition that is not just about the food. Perhaps you play a silly game and make it a tradition. Every year you do holiday charades, or the name game that has a holiday theme or something like that. I know, when we were kids, we used to make a lot of ornaments, and that was very special. And we now have those as adults looking back, and those are the special things, part of a memory that is not about food at all. So maybe making a little bit of advance time to think of a tradition that you could all get involved with, and maybe asking, if you're hosting an event or going to an event, maybe it's something as simple as saying, hey, let's make apple cider together. Everyone bring a mulling spice or something like that. That is food related, but engaging people in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. I also find gratitude is a beautiful connective point.
Yes.
Everyone just saying one thing they're grateful for, or even if you want to go a little bit deeper, rose, thorn, bud. So everyone can say one rose, one thing that's joyous from the day or from the year. If you're coming back together after a year, something beautiful in your life that you want to give thanks for. A thorn is like something that's painful that you're dealing with in your life right now, something you're feeling sad about. And then the bud is like something you're hopeful for, looking forward to in your life. And just that go around, you can literally do that just from the day. And our family does that sometimes multiple days in a row, just around the dinner table. It's amazing how even kids can really get that quickly. It's very simple. And then older folks too. And it kind of drops the waterline a little bit, so we can share on a deeper level about what's really going on in our lives. I think that a lot of us are actually longing for a sense of connection, and you get connection when you combine like vulnerability or realness with love, and a lot of times vulnerability evokes love. You see somebody who's tender and you want to hold them, especially if you do love them deep down. And a lot of times love evokes vulnerability. When you feel safe, you want to share more, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes we need a little structure though to get there, so we don't just talk about small talk or bicker or have the same old loopy conversations we've been having since we were little kids, in family systems. A lot of times there's old patterns. And so formats like that can really help to kind of drop into a bit of a deeper level.
Yeah. And on that note of bickering, and when the food challenges do come up, maybe someone's feeling challenged about their diet at the table, someone asks a question about their diet. It's sometimes really useful to just meet them, as hard as it might be in the moment, but to remember to sit back in that, like you say, with some compassion and see them where they are and just acknowledge them. Sometimes people just want to be heard. They just want to be acknowledged and say, I hear you, and maybe we can have a chat about that after dinner, or go out for tea another time, because sometimes people just want to be heard, and that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Dreena, your latest book is called Dreena's Kind Kitchen. So can you tell us a bit about what a kind kitchen means to you and why you chose that title?
Yeah, well, I think, it encompasses a lot for me, right? Obviously, the diet is kind to the planet, to animals, to ourselves. But I also really resonated with that title because I have, in my work, hoped to come across to people from a place of compassion and say, hey, you don't have to be perfect in the diet. You don't have to be in a certain place or phase. I meet you where you are. And that, this diet is very kind to yourself, but you have to be kind to yourself too. And if you're beating yourself up with everything that's not working or where you're slipping up, then ultimately that's not a kind place to be. So I try to meet people where they are with the recipes, give them lots of tips, lots of insights from my years of cooking, how to take shortcuts, how to make the processes a little bit easier along the way. Excuse me, but ultimately from that place. I was teaching yoga yesterday, and I teach yoga once a week, yin yoga, and there was drilling in the middle of yoga. So we were in these very calm poses, and then we heard this. And I thought after, I said, it was a reminder to ourselves to be with it, to stay with the calmness inside, even though this was going on. And that is the same, when we're eating with family, and perhaps in those moments where we have to sit next to someone that's eating something we don't want to see, to be in our own space, be in our own peace with what we're doing, and know that that's going on. Just be centered in our own selves. So, just sit back with it and be kind to yourself, but also see where people are and meet them there.
Yeah. It seems that part of the kind kitchen is really dialing down the stress too, isn't it? So that healthy eating doesn't have to be another chore, or worse yet, something you berate yourself for falling short of, but rather become something you just enjoyably lean into.
Yeah.
In a way that is friendly, and I think sometimes that friendly is a really nice word for the life I want to create. I'd like my learning and my growth to be friendly. That, there's the old saying, she who will, the fates lead, she who won't, they drag. In other words, you're kind of going to end up on your destiny one way or the other, but you can go kicking and screaming, or you can go like willingly and even enthusiastically. And I, for one, am interested in aligning with my sort of purpose in life, if you will, in the most coherent way I can, so that I can expeditiously work with the forces that guide my life, with my purpose, creator, however you hold it, in terms of your faith perspective, that there's a sense that there's a guiding force behind me, and I want to align with that rather than fighting it,
Yeah.
And to me, that's part of kindness too, in a way.
Yes, beautiful. And I'm reminded of something I say to our children at times during dinner too, when they start to bicker, right? The children arguing, and one wants to be right and one wants to prove. And I say, it's more important to be kind than to be right, and especially with family, we get caught up in those old dynamics, like you said, that old patterns, and coming back to that place of reminding yourself it's just one day, or it's just one meal, and respect where they are, respect where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, Dreena, it's been wonderful chatting with you. And we've been talking here with Dreena Burton, author of many best-selling cookbooks, including Dreena's Kind Kitchen, which is fantastic and delicious. The book isn't delicious. The recipes are delicious. I don't recommend eating the book though. But wonderful, wonderful work you are doing, helping to make whole foods, plant-based eating irresistible. Dreena, I thank you for your leadership, for your kindness, for your wisdom, and for your time with us today.
Thank you so much, Ocean. And I have to tell you, whenever I see my emails come in with new talks that are coming from you, or an article, I always know it's a trusted source of information. And I really appreciate that you're sussing out the questions and the details and the topics for us, and delivering information that can be trusted and reliable. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We wish you health and deliciousness and love and connection and kindness and lots of good food.
Indeed. Bye-bye, everyone.
When it comes to cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic illness, what really matters isn't how many books you read, how many webinars you attend, or how much you know. What really matters at the end of the day is what you eat and how you live. The science has given us what we need to know. Now it's time for action. It's time to implement and optimize your healthy lifestyle. It's time to get results. It's time to say goodbye to confusion and hello to clarity. It's time to say goodbye to bad habits and hello to good ones. It's time to fall in love with foods that love you back. It's time to join a community that will support you in achieving your goals. It's time for Whole Life Club. Click the link to find out more and to join in now.